taking this deep breath, this inhalation and this exhalation, knowing that there is only one. This one life, this one love, this one heart that is all that there is, that permeates and saturates this entire existence. It shows up as grace and peace and ease and understanding and wisdom and fatherhood and motherhood. And it is God, it is Spirit, it is whatever name you want to give it, knowing that the limitations of our language cannot fully encapsulate this divine presence. It is all of those God qualities that just exude out of each and every single one of us. And I see it in everything that I come across. It is in the orcas that cut through the waves and the silken blackness of the Salish seas. It is in that osprey that looms and lurks and looks down, singularly focused on the contents of the lake below. And it is in the temperament of the seasons, spring unwilling to fully let go and summer hesitating to fully embody itself. There is not a spot that this divine presence is not, and as such, I know that I am of it. I am an expression of God. I am an expression of the divine. I represent all that love, all that light, all that life, and there's nothing that I need to do to seek it outside of myself. It is within me at all times, just as it is within each and every person here as well. There's nothing that they need to do. There's no sacrament, there's no title that could be bestowed, no threshold that they need to cross. They are representations of the divine in each and every moment. And so it is from this place of consciousness that I speak my word for this spiritual community here today. I know that the keyboard and the vocals and the music and the arrangement all guides each one to the reaches of their soul and brings them back reawakened, re-enlivened into this space. And just as the twilight dips into its palette to create new colorful expressions, I know that the words here today guide each one to dip into their palette of God qualities to create new expressions of themselves. And I know that in this silence, that each one is able to listen to that divine presence within them, speaking to it in the only way that it can. And so I'm grateful, supremely grateful for this spiritual community, for this word that is spoken, for this ability to commune with the divine in this way. And I'm grateful for the law that always abides, that always says, yes, yes, my beloved, may it be so. And so I surrender, I give over everything into this law, knowing that it is done, knowing that it is so, and I simply say, and so it is.
Take a breath with me. Coming up this Wednesday is a celebration of something new that emerged. It came out of what used to be an order that was not an appropriate order, called slavery. And so this coming Wednesday is known as Juneteenth. And it's a African-American contraction of June and 19th. In June 19th, 1865 was the day that the federal troops arrived in Galveston, Texas, and finally announced and proclaimed that all the slaves were free. Lincoln had written the proclamation, Emancipation Proclamation, thank you, in 1863, January of 1863, but the slaveholders did not want to actually let go of the slaves, and of course the nation was still in the midst of their civil war. And so it took a little while. Unlike today when, in Facebook, it's like, if our president burps, we already know about it within seconds of it happening, right? So, but it took time for them to get over there and to announce it. So it was the day that we celebrate the official freedom of the last of the slaves. Yes. Maya Angelou says, history, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived, but if faced with courage, need not be lived again. And that's, to me, something that we can take on collectively as well as individually. History. How many of you have history with some wrenching pain in it? You know, besides me. So history, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived. We don't need to pretend it didn't happen. But if faced with courage, need not be lived again. And then Angela Davis, who was an African-American activist, many of you may know that name, said, "I am no longer accepting the things I cannot change." So much the serenity prayer, right? I am no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I am changing the things I cannot accept. You have to act as if it were possible to radically transform the world, and you have to do it all of the time. And radical simply means grasping things at the root. So that leads into today's talk. Today's talk is called Unbounded and Unstoppable. And I'm grateful that Brent got that picture of me in the video there with me doing the leap with my guitar.
That was you.
That was me in some other fantasy life. Anyway. And we're part of an annual, a whole year-long look at a grand rising. That is our theme that we're going through, is a grand rising, a collective rising in consciousness. And this month's theme, which is holy boldness, because sometimes, dang it, you just got to be bold, yes? Yes? Timid doesn't get it. I remember there's a lovely phrase of timid women or well-behaved women seldom make history. And the same can be said for well-behaved men, too. Ernest Holmes says, and you've heard this before, so I know that half of you, can probably quote this with me, but here and now we are surrounded by and immersed in an infinite good. How much of this infinite good is ours? All of it. And how much of it may we have to use? As much as we can embody. As much as we can embody. So infinite potential, infinite possibility, only activated and moved into experience, is only activated and moved into experience when we embody it. Otherwise, it just stays as potential energy, yes? You may remember your high school physics class. You know, there's potential and actual energy. It doesn't happen until we embody it. And notice that it isn't as much as some God up in the sky lets us have, nor as much as others, or the system, or the politicians, or the 1%, or whatever let us have. It's as much as who can embody? We. Say I. I can embody. Because we are the valve that opens and closes and lets the flow in, and as much as we want. That's all you are. You're just a valve. It's a good valve to be. Excuse me. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "We are all inlets to the divine and may become outlets for the divine." So we all have this within us, and then to the degree that we allow it to flow, we become outlets for it. We all have access to all good. We all have access to all good. And that's the sermon for the day. We're done, right? But you, like me, may experience a little bit of limitation once in a while, yes? Yeah, so what limits our experience of it? There's a couple of things. First of all is our belief in separation. My belief that I'm separate from that infinite presence. My belief that I'm separate from people around me. My belief that I'm separate from the planet. That whole idea where I forget that I'm one with all. And that all is one with me. Tim said that beautifully in our opening prayer, that infinite that is, the osprey looking at the lake and all that is all oneness. And then the other things that grow out of that are ignorance and fear. Ignorance is that we don't know that we can access the infinite good because nobody ever told us. Or perhaps because they told us we couldn't or shouldn't. Right? And fear is because we would have to leave the comfortable level of the known and sail off into the sea of the infinite unknown, that which lies beyond our current knowing. Sometimes that can feel like, if you've ever been in a boat and you're going to step back onto the dock, there's that moment where you realize there's a little gap between the edge of the boat and the dock. And you realize there's potential danger there, yes? but you want to step back onto that dock. And so to step out of our comfort zone, out of our knowing, is to feel like taking that step. It takes effort and it takes risk, which are a couple of things that many of us prefer to avoid. So the truth is, let me tell you the truth, you're not going to like this truth. We're all in prison. We're all in prison. It might be a big, wonderful prison. It might be a little small, constrictive prison. It might be comfortable, it might be uncomfortable. We all live in prison cells that were originally created by other people, by others, by the collective consciousness, by the collective, what Don Miguel Ruiz calls the domestication of telling you how you should be. Yes? We've all been told, directly or indirectly, to stay in our places, to be good girls or boys, to be good black people or even good white people. You know, you've heard the phrase of don't be a race traitor, don't like those people over there, be loyal to your race, you know, whatever that is. We've been told to be a good person, we've been told to be a good spouse, we've been told to be a good employee, a good citizen. And what does being good mean? Follow the rules, yes? Follow the rules, whether they work or not. I'm changing the things I cannot accept. So to accept our place and don't try to change it, don't get too big for our britches, don't start to think, who do you think you are? All these wonderful conditionings to stay in our cells, yes? To stay in our prison cells, because coming out of our cells will make other people what? Uncomfortable. How dare you be free? Because you taking a bigger step to be a bigger person will make me notice my prison that I'm living in, and then I'm going to have to take that same risk or pretend that it's not there and not happening. Many of us have had families that have, because when we start to set ourselves free, start to say, no, I can't go with you, you're doing it wrong. There's a story of a man walking along the boardwalk, actually it was in Galveston, Texas, was where I heard the story, and there was a vendor there selling crabs, and they were in a low bowl. And the man said, aren't you worried about those crabs getting out? And the man who was telling the story was Mexican, and the guy who was behind the vendor was obviously a bigot. And he looked at him and says, no, those are Mexican crabs. They're like you. Anytime one tries to get out, the others pull them back. Breathe. But that's the truth of our community that surrounds us from where we've been. The ones that want to hold us in that collective story, that collective prison, don't you dare get out, will miss you. Come back. Often people who have been in prison for a long time, when they're freed, have no idea how to live in that state of freedom. We've seen prisoners who revert to behaviors that will return them to prison because it's comfortable and it's safe and it's orderly and it's known. In the metaphor of Plato's cave, the people who are dragged out of the cave, were pulled out of the cave into the light, according to the analogy, run back into the cave because they don't know how to live in the light. They don't know how to live outside of the cave. The need of the intellect to live within walls of what it knows and knows how to function within, in other words, within order, is incredibly strong, and it takes significant and consistent effort to overcome. That was part of Angela Davis's, you have to do it all the time, from that quote. So in addition to the ego's need to stay in the comfortable, known place, we also then have conditioned fears and beliefs that hold us in place. Gay Hendricks, in his book, The Big Leap, uses the model of a thermostat. That we all have a thermostat, we all have a level of comfort that once we get beyond it, we will readjust ourselves back down to that level of comfort. He works with a lot of people who suddenly have great success and then thwart that success in some way or another, to bring them back to where they have been. Giving more power to our, and when we do that, when we bring ourselves back, it gives more power to our conditioned beliefs. It's like, see, who were you to get outside of your britches? Who were you to get outside of the family paradigm, the neighborhood, the whatever? And so we have these conditioned beliefs such as, I don't deserve it, I shouldn't even want it. something's wrong with me. I'll be disloyal to my family, my friends, my community. It'll be too much. I won't be able to handle it. If I get it, it will be taken away from me. That was one of the ones that I've really had to work with. I shouldn't have this much good because others don't have it. And until everybody else gets all the good, I should not have my good. And then, of course, there's the old religious beliefs like, I should suffer here so I can have a wonderful reward in the sky when I die. All of these and all the similar things are just conditioned beliefs to encourage us to play small, to stay stuck, yes? But life, capital L life, is about expansion. It's about being more. It's expressing more of itself, its nature, through new and ever-changing ways. And when we start to deny that flow within us, it's painful. It creates greater suffering, greater misery, because the whole of life is trying to express through us, as us. And when we're sitting there going, no, I don't want to be more. Life's just simply, well, one of two things happens. Either we have physical health issues, mental health issues, whatever, or life says, nah, you're going anyway. I've experienced both of those, as have probably many of you. The real truth is these obstacles to our expansion are only experienced as real until we change our perception and see them for the false perceptions and the illusions that they are. The truth, the capital T truth, the capital R reality is that we are indeed unbounded and unstoppable. Now, take that in. Look at your neighbor and say, I am unbounded and unstoppable now. I'm unbounded and unstoppable now. See, we're the infinite. We are the infinite divine, the infinite presence in individualized but not limited expression. And there's nothing in God, which is our true nature, that withholds good from us or keeps us from our good. There's nothing that tests us. There is nothing that demands that we prove our deservingness or earn the right or learn some imaginary set of lessons or pass some tests in order to experience our good. Breathe. Breathe that in. That infinite good is fully present and fully available right here, right now. How much of it? All of it. Now, having said that, we may have no idea how to access that infinite good because it's so outside of our normal. I remember a story of a person who had moved to the United States from Russia, and they were in the supermarket, and if I remember right, it was in the laundry detergent aisle, and they were paralyzed at the variety of choices that they had because they had never experienced that in their life, and they had no idea how to just buy laundry detergent. It was so radical and so new. It was a freedom that was so outside of their norm. So it's one thing to say it's all available, and another thing to truly embody that. See, in the Plato's cave analogy, if the person that was dragged, in the analogy, the person is dragged out of the cave, if instead they have been gradually led out of the cave, helped to adapt to various levels of light, they very likely might have been able to live in the light. Prisons these days have programs to help people who are being released to readapt and re-enter into society so that they don't have to come back. It's easier to have a gradual transition, to gradually expand what we call our mental equivalent, which is simply our idea of what's normal or our thermostat of how much good we can take. So we can treat ourselves gently and with compassion as we ease into expanding our embodiment of good in our lives. In other words, you don't go around and beat yourself up and go, well, infinite good's available to me and I got this limitation. What is wrong with me? Nothing. You've just been conditioned that way like generations have before you. And so we're gradually, just the fact that you can even look at that and say, that's available to me, is a step forward for many of us. So gently and compassionately ease into expanding our embodiment of good in our lives. as we gently raise our thermostat. So at first it may look like small results. It may look like very little or even nothing is happening, but if we keep at it, we'll start to see results start to grow. I've used this metaphor before, but there's a type of bamboo when you plant it, for the first 4 years shows no growth above the surface, and the last year grows 90 feet, the 5th year. It's developing a whole underground process in order to support its growth, which is often when we first start doing our work, what is happening is we don't necessarily see it in big terms out here, but we're developing underneath. We're developing our thought, we're developing our consciousness, we're expanding how much good we can have within before it starts to show up. So, you want to know some ways to raise your thermostat?
Yes.
Couple? Okay, good. For the couple that do, I'll talk to you. The rest of you can, go to sleep. Choosing where we want to expand our lives instead of just saying, I want more good everywhere. Have a focus. Have a focus. It helps us to direct our energy and our results. And by the way, usually when you expand your good in one area of your life, what happens in other areas of your life? The good also expands over there, yes? Because something has shifted and it flows into other areas. So the first step is to focus, to have a where do I want it? Once we choose an area, it's important to understand both what we need in order to grow in that area and what we need to let go of that has been holding us back in that area. In the visioning process, we ask the questions, what must I become and what must I release if I want something greater in my life? And so we work with that. Where do I want to go? What must I become? What new things must I learn? And also, what stuckness must I let go of? See, I can't continue being the same person with the same limiting beliefs and habits and expect myself to show up and expect my life to show up differently. My current beliefs have kept me in my current prison. So I have to expand, I have to change, and I have to make that change into a habit, which leads us into our third process in this, which is to create support and expansion. And we do that by hanging out with expanded and expanding people. With people who are a little ahead of us, a little more expanded than us. When I was a hardcore cyclist, I wanted to get better at it. And I started training with a racing team. And it was embarrassing at first. Because I would arrive, we would go climb hills. In my normal group that I usually rode with, I was one of the first ones at the top of the hill. With the racing team, I was one of the last ones, gasping for breath at the top of the hill. And as soon as I get there, okay, Robinson's here, let's go. It's like, can I catch my breath? No. But after a while, and after some practice, and after some training and shift, I became one of the middle group at the top of the hill. And after a little while, I became in the lead group at the top of the hill. And then they started looking at me and saying, we want you to race with us on our team. And I said, no, thank you. I wanted to get healthier. I did not want to have broken bones, skinned up, skin and abrasions and all that stuff. But it was a way to hang out with people who were more advanced than with me and gradually let myself be pulled into that level of being. So that's how you get support. Who do you hang out with? Are they people who are just like you are now, comfortable and familiar cellmates in your own prison? Or are you willing to hang with people who will challenge you, who are already embodying the good you would like to experience more of and go through that little bit of embarrassment of, I'm not quite there yet, but I'm working on it. People who are truly expanded will recognize the working on it and support you in that process. We have to be teachable. I remember that from one of my very first personal growth seminars is, are you so stuck or can you be teachable? Being teachable is being open, being vulnerable, being, yes, I'm willing to learn something new, I'm willing to try something new. One of the real pieces of sadness that I experience about this community is that people don't seem to work as often as I would love to see them work with, and as fully with practitioners. And these are people who are trained to see through this stuff, trained to help you and support and expand, to help you to move through this stuff into a greater experience of freedom. I know when I was coming up as a congregant, I spent a lot of time and a lot of money with practitioners. I always consider working with a practitioner to be sort of like on the Monopoly board, going from wherever I was, clear to go, skipping a whole lot of steps in between that would have taken me months or years to slog through. I invite you to work with people who can support you in expanding. Many of the really growing communities have an abundance of practitioners who are busy. When I was in CSL Seattle with 60 practitioners, I practically made a living, a good living, seeing clients. That's possible. So, knowing you are in truth unbounded and unstoppable, how much good do you want to embody? And are you willing to change the things within yourself and the world which you can no longer accept? So this week, basically one spiritual practice with 3 parts. And the practice is raise your thermostat. Willing to do that? Yeah.
Yes.
Anybody? Okay. Couple people, good. So for those couple of people, number 1, choose an area of your life where you want to experience greater good. Pick one. Doesn't matter which one. It'll flow into everything. Pick one. Number 2, explore what you must learn or become and what you must release in that area. And then 3, hang out with supportive people who are growing and expanding. Are you willing to play with that this week?
Yes.
Great. So this past week, Richard Rohr was exploring sacred sexuality, which is odd for a Catholic priest to be exploring sacred sexuality, but he was. And he called it an embodied experience of infinite love. And he shared a quote that came from a paper that was written by the Catholic Theological Society of America called Human Sexuality, New Directions in American Catholic Thought in 1977. And in it, it said, our sexual actions must aim to be self-liberating, other-enriching, honest, faithful, socially responsible, life-serving, and joyous. Needless to say, the Vatican came down real hard on that paper, disapproved of it completely. But when I read that, it reminded me of a set of questions that Ernest Holmes invites us to explore about our good. And it's just to ask ourselves, do the things we want lend themselves to a constructive outcome? Do they express a more abundant life, rob no one, create no delusion, and express a greater degree of livingness? If we are able to answer these questions affirmatively, then all of the power of the universe is behind our desire. So I invite you this week to ask yourself, what is it that will bring more life, hurt no one, be in integrity, be in honesty with who I am? See, going on a shopping spree and saying, I'm going to buy an abundance of stuff to mask over the pain you're feeling in some other area of your life is not honest. That's creating delusion. Am I willing to do that? Am I willing to express a greater degree of livingness? And so I invite you to do that this week. We have an affirmation to support us in that. Say this with me. I am free. I expand the experience of joy in my life and the world. And so it is.